Welcome back to another clock collection update, finally. This is basically half a year after the last one, but there's been quite a few new additions, so let's get into that. We'll start with this one right here. It is another Junghans wag on the wall. This one was made likely in the 1960s, just like I assume the other one was made in. Although Junghans does not really date their movements like Hermle does, so it's a little bit hard to tell, but these clocks are generally made in the 60s during the mid-century modern era of design. And this one sounds like this. Got that lovely Junghans loudspeaker to amplify the decay of the chime rods. And here's another little novelty clock. It's a grandfather novelty clock made by Kronheimer, New York, United States. And it has a Lux movement in it from the Lux Clock Company in Waterbury, Connecticut. Notable thing about it is attached to the pallet forks is a little fake pendulum, which is fun to watch and see. Here's another new one. It's a Seth Thomas 30-hour cottage clock, similar to one I had before, but it broke. This one works, though, a lot better than the other one originally did. It just needs a heavier pendulum bob, because the current pendulum bob it has is too light, and that makes the time too sporadic. But I will let you hear what this sounds like. That gong is likely a replacement, and likely belongs to a Waterbury, as someone suggested. Gonna stop that. Here's another new one. This is an unbranded Regula cuckoo clock, and it has a Mapsa music box in it that plays It's a Small World and Edelweiss. It also has an animated wood chopper and an animated water wheel, as well as animated dancers as usual. So I'll let you hear the half hour and the hour. The half hour you're going to hear Edelweiss first. Now you're going to hear It's a Small World. Here's another one that I haven't covered in a collection video because, well, I didn't have it, the last collection video. It's a Hermle Ravensburg. These are very common. You can buy these on Amazon, brand new, for like $150 something, but if you get them from other good dealers, you can probably get them for like 90 or even 80. Anyway, it's an 8-day skeleton movement from Hermle with a passive strike at the hour. Basically means it'll toll a bell once. As demonstrated. This isn't going to be a permanent edition, but I thought it would be cool to show because it belongs to a friend of mine and it's going to go back to him eventually. But it is a Japanese box clock. We're not exactly sure who the manufacturer is behind it. Someone suggested it could be Eikosha, but I'm not entirely convinced that it's Eikosha because it has a trademark that differs from Eikosha's trademarks, which are typically letters or just the word Eikosha. Here's another noteworthy addition. This is a Forestville wall clock, which I'm just going to call the Hubcap clock because it looks like a hubcap. Amazing idea, I know. I've said this before, but it reminds me of an old Ford truck's hubcap without the chrome dome in the center. In the center, there's just a clock with a brass type of ring. It has an 8-day table clock-like movement in it, and it's so janky that it's hilarious, honestly. In order to wind it up, you have to take it off the wall, which, I mean, I guess you kind of have to do that with rope clocks as well, but some rope clocks just have a winding hole at the front, but this one, nope. You have to take it off the wall and wind it up like an alarm clock. And I think that's just kind of funny to me. Here's another clock that was not shown in the previous collection video. This is a Slava alarm clock. It was made in the USSR, probably during the 1960s or sometime after the 1960s. It has a very robust movement in it. It's watch-like. It's upscaled, obviously, but it's very nice movement, and it keeps really good time, all things considered, for its size and such. And it has, I think, 11 jewels in it, which is pretty good, considering it came from a communist country, and that these were for sale to the general public, at least as far as I'm aware. That is Cyrillic there on the front for Slava, which means glory. Try not to get political in my comments section over current events, but yeah, there's a Russian alarm clock. By the way, I didn't chime this one because I'm trying to time it in currently. Okay, well, there's all the new ones, pretty much, and I will now let you see all the old ones again. I'll tell you a little bit about them if you are newer here. This is a 30-hour Regula cuckoo clock, unbranded, and it has a music box in it that plays Edelweiss and Somewhere My Love. I believe this style of cuckoo clock is a chalet style, and this clock features the Oompa band, along with some dancers on the top. And the animated cuckoo, of course, behind the door, because cuckoo clock wouldn't be a cuckoo clock without the animated cuckoo. Another Russian clock. This is my Vostok Russian submarine clock. That text there says Komandorsky, which means commander. Very Russian styled. Now, if the Soviets were dating their things the way I'm thinking, this says March of 93, so March of 1993. And I'm sure that you all are aware the Soviet Union fell in 1989, if I recall correctly. And I assume that if the Soviet Union fell in 1989, and this is dated 1993, they were probably still making these after the Soviet Union fell, but they weren't properly remarking them or anything like that. They weren't saying made in Russia, they were just saying Сделано в СССР still. But yeah, there's just a little bit of a assumption. Here's a Schneider 30-hour cuckoo clock with a Regula movement, of course. It's a very simple cuckoo clock. It belongs to my parents. It was an anniversary gift they bought in 2000 or 2001, I think, from the same clock shop I still visit today, 20 or so years later. So that's pretty neat. The deer and the rabbit there are animated, and then I think there's a little baby deer there. So that's cute. It's also got nice window details, and I think those are pine trees. Here's a Tuzuka Popo cuckoo clock. In case you're wondering why the Japanese decided to call this clock a Popo, it's likely because Popo is kind of like the Japanese version of choo-choo, as in like a choo-choo train. I think. I read this from somewhere, so take it with a grain of salt, but it sounds like Popo, and that sounds like choo-choo, and as you know, cuckoo clocks make a woo-hoo type sound, so maybe they just assumed, hey, let's just put Popo because it kind of sounds like a choo-choo, when we call it cuckoo. It has a music box in it. This is the Popo OH-25 from Tuzuka, and it has a song on a Sankyo music box, Erize no Tameni, which is for Elise. This is a W-Hate tradition from 1973 or 1974, can't quite remember, I think it's 1974. and it has a triple chime Hermle movement in it with a floating balance. Somehow still going, even though it needs a bushing on the time side very, very badly, but it's still going. These Hermles are little troopers, I'm telling you. These clocks are very common. I actually know of another clock collector friend who owns one, Connor's Clocks. He owns one just like this. Here's another Japanese clock. It's a Seiko Melodia, and it has a Sankyo music box in it that plays Swan Lake, which, if you all are familiar with pop culture, that is a song that is used by Scott Cawthon in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. Trivia aside, this movement has 2 jewels in it. It was made in Japan, and it is a very solid alarm clock movement. This thing keeps excellent time once you get it regulated in. And it has a very nice reflective dial there, as you can tell by the camera. I also like the addition of the second counter. Fine. I don't really know if it's exactly precise, but it lets you know the clock's running at least. Here is a Hamilton mantle clock. It's a timbre mantle clock, and it's very nice. It has a replacement Hermle movement in it, I do believe. The movement was made in 2005, so it is just a year younger than me, and it's still going very strong. It's a Westminster chime only movement, and I really like this clock. It's very simple, very basic. Here's, of course, the staple of any American clock collection. This is a Howard Miller Shelburne, or a Howard Miller regulator, as people also like to call it. Plays Westminster chimes. And like this one, it has a Hermle movement in it. It's just this one's the 341-020, which means that it has a pendulum. Quite a long one at that. Here's my travel alarm shelf, all at somewhat different times. This is a Westclock's travel alarm. It's very tiny. It's 2.75 centimeters by 2.75 centimeters, I think. Which seems about right, considering my hand as a comparison, and I don't have the biggest hands in the world, so keep that in mind as well. Here's a Linden travel alarm. Cool thing about this one is you can actually see the times all around the world. It has different time zones, so for instance, it's almost 2 a.m., and that shows in Chicago as 2, because here's the 24-hour dial. In Sydney right now, Sydney, Australia, it's 1800 almost. Tokyo, it's almost 1700. In Paris, it's 6 in the morning. In London, it's 8 in the morning currently. Buenos Aires, it's 4 in the morning. Just to give you a demonstration, New York, it's 3 in the morning. Pretty cool. And here's yet again another Westclock's travel alarm. This time it's a travel Ben, which is basically a baby Ben, but shrunken down even more into a travel alarm. It's very cool, very cute, I think, but the movement, frankly, sucks. There's no other way to put it nicely. Alright, and here is another old edition. This is a Hearth, or what I think was supposed to be a heart wall clock. The name on the movement says Hearth, despite the logo being a heart with an H in the middle. Oh, Japanese companies. Japanese clocks are super interesting, though. This has an 8-day movement in it, and it's in the style of an American long drop. And it has regulator A on the dial, which is inaccurate. Regulator A is an Ansonia term, not a Japanese clock term. Here is a true American short drop. This is a Seth Thomas short drop with an 89C movement in it, I believe. It is a very nice clock. Keeps very good time. And it also has a Geneva stop on both sides of the winding hole, so that's handy. Here's yet again another short drop, this time by New Haven. Not as great of a timekeeper as this one, but it gets the job done, I suppose. It's an 8-day movement, just like this one is, and it's a single train, so no chimes on this one, no passive chimes on this one. It strictly tells the time, like a clock is supposed to. This one has an interesting oddity, however. Instead of being made in America, like it would probably say on this dial, this one says it was the New Haven Clock Company, Brantford, Ontario. So this clock was made for somewhere in Canada, likely, which is interesting. I've seen basically identical clocks to this one where that text down there instead says made in USA, but this one for some reason wants to dictate that it was made for Brantford, Ontario, so not entirely sure why, but here we are. Here's quite a decrepit Semka Mauthe carriage clock. It's on its way out, I think. The timekeeping ability on this thing is just not good. But, you know, things happen and break and stuff, and that's just the way it is. But I don't think these would be particularly annoying to find on eBay or anything like that, so I suppose I could just keep my eye out. It has a half-hour and hour strike, full-fledged one with a rack and snail and such. And here is a much bigger Mauthe, Friedrich Mauthe Schwenningen, and as the name suggests, it was made in Schwenningen, Schwenningen, in Germany, likely during the 1920s, so this could be a pre-war clock, pre-World War II, and it has bim bam. It's a very nice clock, keeps very good time for its age, and I just love it. I don't ever want to part with this one. It's so cute and tiny, too, for a box clock. Yet, the chime is also very bold and pronouncing. It stands out. Here's a drop dial wall clock from Junghans. This was likely another mid-century thing from them during the 60s or the 70s. Maybe even the 50s. Kind of the 50s to the 70s era, I would say. There's not exactly a date on this movement as far as I'm aware. And up here is another mid-century modern Junghans. This one is very tiny, and it has a even smaller movement in it that does bim bam on the hour and half hour. Here's my Helmut Kamakar passive striking cuckoo clock. Basically what a passive striking cuckoo clock is a cuckoo clock that does not strike the hour and half hour and count those hours on the hour. It just cuckoos every 15 minutes with a passive mechanism. So basically there's a fan type thing in the movement that lifts an arm, and that lifts some bellows here at the back. As you can see, they're lifting up, and once it reaches the hour, it just lets go of that arm, and the arm drops, and the bellows activate. So you get a cuckoo, singular cuckoo, and that occurs every 15 minutes. So it's a cute little novelty clock. Nothing serious. It has a flick type pendulum. No crutch. Here's my Trend triple chime wall clock. This is my biggest, beefiest, most expensive clock, and it's very pretty. It has a triple chime, as I have said. It plays Whittington, St. Michael's, and Westminster. It uses a Hermle 1051-030A, I think. Anyway, the A is not very important. Here is my Seth Thomas column clock. It's very similar in principle to an Ogi clock, or an OG clock, however you wish to pronounce that term, except it has columns on each side. Very nice columns, I must say. This clock was restored by City Clock Company in my town, I do believe, and this clock is also a Kimi Räikkönen fan. Notable thing about this clock, aside from it being a Kimi Räikkönen fan, is that it has an alarm inside here, which is very nice. This thing will wake you up, and the whole house as well. Say hi to Freddy. This is my 30-hour Gilbert kitchen clock, and has a very nice style case. I do not recall the model of this, but I will post a screenshot here of the back of the clock and you can see the model name of this Gilbert clock. I really like the painted glass here. It shows a type of garden scene with a great blue heron there. A couple of them, actually. I love birds. Here is a Sessions beehive mantle clock. It's roughly a beehive style anyway. I'm not entirely sure if it's a proper beehive, but it looks like one, so I'm just going to keep calling it that unless someone corrects me, which someone probably will, and then I'll be angry at myself that I've been doing it wrong this entire time, and they'll also be angry at me that I've been doing it wrong this entire time. But anyway, so this has a very typical 1920s American clock movement in it. It has passive bell strike on the half hour, and then it strikes on a cathedral gong for the hour, which is coming up very shortly. And here's a Kern anniversary clock with a diamond-shaped dial, which is very interesting to say the least. I quite like it for that. And this clock has not been wound up since December 2021, and miraculously, it's only stopped like 5 times. Miraculously, I say that like it's some sort of achievement, but anyway, other than stopping a few times throughout the year, I mean, it's a really good timekeeper, considering it's a torsion pendulum clock, which I don't think they're notably great timekeepers. But it's neat. Neat 400-day clock. Here is a German timbre mantle clock. I believe this is a timbre style anyway, or some kind of timbre style. Anyway, the movement's completely unmarked. All I know is the pendulum length is 15 centimeters, which, as you can see, it's running a bit slow. I need to get it a new pendulum, actually. The adjustment nut is too loose for the thread, unfortunately, and that causes the nut to unscrew itself, basically, as the pendulum's swinging, and that makes the clock run slower. I also think it's too light for the clock because the timekeeping is just way too sporadic for this, so I'm going to try and find a new 15 centimeter pendulum and modify it to fit with this clock. I'll likely be using a Hermle one. Here's another mantle clock. It's a Hamilton Wheatland in the style of a bracket clock, and it has a Hermle 340-020 movement in it. That's an 8-day Westminster chime only movement, and it's very nice. I love this one. It's incredibly solid, the woodworking. It's not cheap wood. It's very heavy, this clock. If you were to drop it on your foot, for whatever reason, it would probably break your foot. So, don't do that. In this place used to be a Bulova Atomat bracket clock, but I traded it with my friend Nicholas for this one, which wasn't working, and I restored this one into operating condition, and now I have it. Here is a Waterbury timbre mantle clock with, I must say, a very pretty case. And this clock seems very French-inspired to me. The placement of the winding holes, as well as the style of the movement. It's very European-inspired on Waterbury's part. And this clock strikes on a singular chime rod, which is a little underwhelming, to say the least, but hey, it's a cute little clock. And this is Homer Bird, and this is a 30-hour cuckoo clock. It's probably my oldest cuckoo clock. It was likely made in the 50s, I think, and it does have a wooden bird. I believe that is a wooden bird. It doesn't look plastic to me. So this is one of my oldest cuckoo clocks and my smallest cuckoo clock in my collection, if you don't count that one. Uses two very small, very cute 250 gram weights. 250. And it's very small, very cute. It has a very tiny coiled gong for the hour. And the cuckoo bellows are super high-pitched. It's just so cute. It's cute, cute, cute. Here is an AMS swag on the wall. It has a Regula style of movement in it. It was made by SBS Fine Technique for AMS. In case you didn't know, SBS Fine Technique makes Regula. And this clock strikes on a bell for the hour and the half hour. Moving back into Japanese territory, here's a Seiko Loris 30-day wall clock. It used to have a Loris sticker right around here. I have footage of that originally being there, but I removed it because I was getting annoyed by it. But it was there. The case has some damage, unfortunately, but I got this clock for like $25, so I'm not complaining. The movement could use some degreasing for the mainsprings and some new mainspring grease, but I do not currently have that stuff. That'll just have to wait. But I have put new oil in it around a year or so ago now, maybe a couple years. And here's another Seiko wall clock. This one is in a more mid-century modern style in comparison to this one. I really quite like this one, all the chrome and such. I'm a big fan of chrome. This one also features winding indicators so that you can see when it's time to wind it up. Those will turn red at the very end, letting you know that it's time to wind things up. Here is a Plymouth timbre mantle clock. Those hands are not original. However, I think they fit the style of the clock fairly nice. Anyways, this was a gift from my friend Deb over at City Clock Company for my 17th birthday. Thank you so much. I had to supply my own pendulum for it because someone stole the original pendulum. This Plymouth strikes every 15 minutes, so you have one bim bam for the first quarter, 2 bim bams for the second quarter, 3 bim bams for the third quarter, and then it lifts one hammer and only uses one chime rod to count the hour. So this is a quarter striking clock. It's not quite petite sonnerie, but it is a quarter striking clock. This is an Ingram black case mantle clock. First off, I must reiterate that this black case is simply wooden. It is painted black. It's wood that's painted black, so it is not cast iron like some other styles of these clocks are, which are extremely, extremely heavy. If this one were made entirely out of cast iron, then I would be terrified because it would be incredibly heavy. It has very nice brass legs there. It also has brass features on the side. And it has some nice brass columns with some red wood there that's mimicking marble, but it is just wood that is painted marble. There are these styles of clocks that have real marble, but this must have been a lower end model from Ingram. The case has a date of purchase or a date of manufacture, something on it, 1915 or 1925. I'd be more inclined to believe that this was 1915. However, I don't really have any way of confirming this. I would confirm it, but the handwriting, whoever wrote it back then is just so bad at writing, I can't tell if it's 1915 or 1925. And here is a Korean Parliament bracket clock, or a Daejin. The movement maker is Daejin. Goes for 31 days. The chime side is a little wonky. It will give up about a week before winding, unfortunately, so not quite sure what's going on there. Maybe it needs bushes or something, but I've already put fresh oil in it, so it could be that the spring just was never powerful enough. It could be that it needs bushings. I don't know. It's Korean. It's cheap, relatively, and those things just happen, so that's pretty much it for my room now, so I will bring you upstairs and we'll have a look at some clocks that are up there, and then we'll pretty much be done. So we're upstairs now, and this is a 31-day Waltham wall clock. It's Korean made, and it has a coiled gong for the chime. There's not much else really notable to say about it, other than The case is massive. The pendulum thread for the nut is stripped, so it's a little bit annoying to get it to keep time, but I make it work. And right over here, right next to it, is a New Haven box style regulator. It doesn't have the original glass because the original glass was broken, unfortunately, but there would normally be some text there in the bottom. And that dial is a replacement. It's one that I made up myself with the help of Tommy Wiley. And it is not entirely true to an original New Haven dial, because that trademark would normally only be on the movement. But you know what? I don't care. It's my own interpretation of a New Haven dial. I still need to get it a grommet for the winding hole, but I mean, it works for right now. And it's not the best recreation of a dial. It's got some issues, but I mean, it gets the job done for the time being. This is basically half a and it has a Maps Swiss music box. And this is my Gilbert cottage clock. Cottage. What? No. That is no. That's a cottage clock. No, you freaking idiot. This is a kitchen clock. Why are you so dumb? Anyways, it's a cute little. It's a cute little clock.